Now, we've heard a lot about the importance of technology in enabling business and life to carry on uninterrupted, and then we got an interruption. So my apologies to you, Joanna, for that. But I think you were about to tell us a story about a real life experience with a user that came your way at lunchtime.
Yes, it was sorry. Look, I'm happy to sort of move on, but I was just sort of saying that I one of the things that I need to be careful about doing is telling people what I do, because I had my ear very soundly as I was having my nails done about the lady who told me all of her pain and tribulations in terms of having to applying for UK citizenship and how many documents you have to fill in, paper forms and all that kind of thing, and why can't it just be online? And it's a fair challenge, you know, why can't it just be online? But a lot of what we need to do in order to be able to enable that to happen is to get much better at how we set standards that enable us to be interoperable. And that was actually the key point that I was trying to make. And that goes for digital, it also goes for data. And so we've got a mission within CDDO to set appropriate data standards and to work across departments to work out how we can share data more effectively. And then, of course, we've got to modernise our infrastructure. We still have a lot of legacy. We still have a lot of risk in our legacy platforms, but we've got a fabulous opportunity as well in terms of moving more into the cloud. But doing that, I would say, in a way that enables us to continue to be interoperable and to actually know where our data is, because that is increasingly something that I get challenged on by our ministers in terms of, you know, do we really understand where our data is and have we really managed the risk? So those are the sorts of and then capability, of course, is the big one. I mean, all of this works if we've got the right people in the right places to actually deliver. And we're working on a capability strategy that has two dimensions. One is, how do we upskill the general civil service, because as a leader in any organisation these days, you really have to understand digital, what it can do, digital and data, and how it can actually help you deliver the services that and your policies. And so we're working on how we do that. I can talk a bit more about that if you're interested. And we're also looking at what do we need to do in order to ensure that we've got a clear standard for digital data and technology professionals across government, and the right kind of career paths and reward frameworks that enable us to recruit and retain the skills that we need. So that's what we're working on, and there's also a set of other things that we're doing in terms of working with colleagues in Treasury and in commercial teams and in HR, looking at how do we actually shape the structure of our broader policies and ways of working to support a digital way of working. Some of the way in which we do business cases, some of the way in which we do finance doesn't really support a lot of what we want to do in digital. So that's the kind of very big and broad agenda that we're working on, and I'm very happy to pick up in the detailed question. In terms of working with the tech sector, we will always need to work with partners where I have an ambition to get a bit clearer about, you know, where we want to do things in-house versus where do we want to work with partners. I think that would help all of us if we get a bit more clarity and strategy around that. But in terms of my ask, it would be, you know, I really we've got a broad agenda, we've got a big agenda, but we need to look at this from an enterprise perspective. So really keen to work with industry in terms of, you know, how do we create that enterprise interoperable view, whether that's through open standards or whether it's through a clearer idea of business and technology architecture. But that's kind of my ambition and where I'd like to go.
Excellent. So a lot of questions come out of that, Joanna, and obviously a number of us have been engaged in a lot of this for quite some time. So one of the things that struck me is you had a good definition of the sort of responsibilities you have, you know, for strategy, for standards, for policy, spend control. So you've got a big stick as well as all the encouraging stuff. But what about support? Because often in the past, that's bedeviled transformation, is that actually officials are as siloed in their view of how government operates, and that starts right at the top, really, doesn't it, with ministers and perm secs. We were very encouraged to have Alex Chisholm come and talk to our sort of public services board at Tech UK, which was really encouraging, as it shows he sort of gets the importance of digital. But have they really changed, or do you find yourself, well, we've got somebody fixing that, so we can stay the way we are. We don't need to change the culture here because somebody will sort it out for us.
It's such a good question, because I mean, one of we're trying to we need to be interoperable enterprise view, across what is actually a very, very federated system. Government isn't one entity, so it is a federated system. So I think there's a number of things we're doing on that, and it's not going to change overnight. But there are a number of things that we're doing, and I think there's some real sort of encouraging signs in terms of people do get it. So one of we've implemented a digital and data sub-board of the Civil Service Board, which is a permanent secretary level board, which is now the primary board through which we have conversations about things that we need to do across government. And it's early days, but my ambition for that group is that we use it to really nail down, what are the things that we actually have to do consistently together. It doesn't necessarily have to be a single shared service, but what do we have to do in a way that's consistent in order that we get the benefits of interoperability and data sharing and end-to-end user journeys and digital services, versus what are the things that actually flexibility departments just go do. And so I think we've at least got the mechanism now to have that conversation. I think one of the reasons I think GDS was very successful in its early days was it was very, very clear about what were the very few red lines that if we just do this is what's going to actually move us forward. So we're doing a piece of work which you and I had a brief exchange about, Julian, to sort of look at what's the strategy and plan for the next cross government for the next 3 to 4 years, and what are those few key things that we need to collectively as a community get behind and do in that consistent way, and we can put our hard levers of spend controls behind that and actually forward in that direction. But I won't pretend it's easy. It's why I'm really, really keen that a large part of what my organisation does is build the community, because if we have a community of chief technology officers, if we have a community of chief data officers, and if they're essentially the design authority, they're generally very sensible people who will come together and create that sense of cross-government strategy. And it's really important that it is a co-creation and a coalition of the willing like that. I don't think top-down mandates particularly work.
Right. So I'm quite interested in that, because obviously the DDAT profession is pretty well established now within government. But a couple of things I'd like to explore with you, if I can, on that. Well, the first one is, you and I both know this in places we worked elsewhere, that creating a very coherent tech community can often actually give you a challenge of how does that tech community connect with its user community. Particularly, I mean, we've worked in big organisations, but this is the beast, isn't it? Government is the biggest organisation, especially if you go anywhere near the NHS. So, how do you stop the techies becoming insular or whatever, or on the other hand, how do you stop them disappearing into the users orbit and not doing those central things that are so important?
Yeah, really, really, really good question. I mean, I think a lot of this is about, and it's back to one of the key agenda items I talked about before. We've got to ensure that the wider civil service is sufficiently digital data tech savvy and enabled to be able to act as that sort of intelligent client customer, if you like, for the digital data and technology function. That's on the one side. On the other side, I would like to see our DDAT teams really embracing the broader kind of civil service culture and getting and I'd like to see some porosity. I'd like to see some movement between and policy and operational roles within the civil service and vice versa. And one of the things that we've been working with our HR colleagues on is a scheme for how we might cross-train and sort of bring people in from from the wider civil service and train them in as in DDAT, because there's not all DDAT roles require an engineering degree. There are some there's a lot of DDAT work that can be done by people who have skills that are already present in the wider civil service.
And I know you're very focused on how you use the weight of the civil service, the government organisation, to encourage a pipeline of talent. We've talked about the initiatives on that front, and we want to help with that. It's one of the areas, though, the focus on apprenticeships and engagement of different communities in digital is one of the areas of general government policy which comes your way. There are many, aren't there? And you have to keep watching what, not just what technical people in departments are doing, but what the policy people are doing. So more and more green and climate change and net zero measures coming your way. I've got a feeling you've got a pretty old estate of outdated technology kicking around. It was discussed a bit this morning, the legacy thing. And if you go wider public sector, you find even older things. Now, how are you going to bring all that lot into the modern age? Is that your job, or is it, how does government do it? And you're an agent of change.
Yeah. So look, it's clearly something we've got to pay a lot of attention to, and I think I've been very encouraged in the last 18 months or so that the message is getting through, even at even in Treasury.
Because there's a cost, isn't there?
There is a cost, but there's also a fabulous opportunity, and the business case is pretty good, actually. In terms of if we can reduce the legacy, we reduce the risk, we actually reduce the cost of running our core estate, and we open up flexibility and opportunity. So, but it's challenging to make some of those business cases in the context of very tight fiscal envelope, and also there's a lot of operational risk in terms of moving off legacy, which we can't ignore. So what are we doing? I mean, there's a lot. We're putting a lot of focus and emphasis on it. I mean, one of the things that we're working on within the Central Digital and Data Office is actually getting more transparency and visibility and a common understanding of the status of our infrastructure. You might ask why we don't already have that. I mean, it is quite difficult to get, and even within the bigger complex departments, they've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years. But that sort of inventory of what was out there just sort of wasn't there, and it wasn't out there in a way that enabled us to make to look in a common currency. So we were able to look at risk across the whole of the estate. And I think it's really important that we find a way to do that so that we can explain it to the non-techies. It's also, I think, important that we recognise that this is not going to get fixed overnight. I mean, this is a 2-3 spending review cycle problem to work through, and so we've also got to be, I think, a bit more thoughtful about how we triage and really focus on the things fixing now, because not all legacy is bad. Some of it operates, it functions. So those are the kind of tools that we're trying to develop within CDDO to enable us to get that perspective across government.
And as you sort of look at this, obviously, and picking up so we're running on a little bit longer, Joanna. Hopefully you're able to stay with us, but because of the sort of technical hitch we had, I don't want to cut you off too soon. And I'm also conscious the panel has arrived and is all raring to go on the citizen-centric smart estate, which obviously has been a big theme from Tom and you today. But I wonder if I could just a couple more quick questions. And one of them is in terms of communication. Are you looking at tools and platforms, ways to do this? Can you change that? Obviously, you've got to deal with the culture of government, which isn't really open. Let me rephrase that, which isn't versed in the idea of broad comms. Let's keep things here and inside. But you also got the scale and size of the communications and the whole language thing and so on. Is there a plan to adopt new automation techniques, new platforms, are we going to end up with TikTok videos to explain things? What have you thought about?
we haven't quite got as far as TikTok, but I mean, I think one of the things to recognise is delivery will always be in the departments. So, and to a certain extent, I'd like to leave departments with as much flexibility as possible to do what they need to do in order to be able to meet the needs of their policies and their systems. So, but what the challenging thing for us is that what we do need to do is understand, where do we need to be consistent in order to be able to get the benefits of, end-to-end services, sharing data, etc. So I don't think I wouldn't see us mandating from the centre that you must use this technology, not that technology. I would. One of my ambitions, and this is why I've actually majored on appointing a chief technology officer in the centre. There's also a chief data officer that has joined us. Is looking at how do we create a community of CTOs and a community of chief data officers and ultimately a community of digital practitioners who can develop that strategy together and make the choices because they're the people who are best qualified to do it. So where that will take us, I'm not going to give any predictions about specific technologies, but I think what I would imagine will happen is there will probably be some convergence because at the moment we've just got just about something of everything.
Yeah.
But as part of the strategy, we've also got to keep the drive for open standards as well. And the more we can open, get away from proprietary and bespoke and those sorts of things, then the more opportunity there will be for us to actually have more flexibility about choice, but still be able to interoperate. So that's also quite an important thing that we need to drive as a community over the next few years.
So let me finish and move on to the panel, but let me just finish by saying you talked about wanting the suppliers to help, and I think we at Technico are very keen to play our part in convening those helpers and actually directing them at things which do help as much as we can, because sometimes a lot of energy is spent on things which don't necessarily help. So we look forward to it, engaging with you and your team and the broader team and the departments, of course, as well, on how can we really do something against the challenges that you've outlined there. Thank you very much for your time and joining us.